Operation Primrose, the capture of U-110's Enigma machine. Through the driving rain and heaving seas of the North Atlantic, Sub-Lieutenant David Balme could barely make out the dark shape of the German U-boat lying dead in the water. In 7 minutes, he would make one of the most important discoveries of World War II. But first, he had to survive climbing down a rope ladder into the freezing waves, rowing through artillery-churned waters, and entering what could very well be a trap rigged with explosives. The 28-year-old officer had no way of knowing that his next few actions would help crack Hitler's unbreakable code, save countless Allied lives, and change the course of history. The capture of the Enigma machine aboard U-110 remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of World War II for decades after the war's end. While Hollywood has immortalized the more famous capture of an Enigma from U-559 in the Mediterranean, it was this earlier mission codenamed Operation Primrose that provided Allied codebreakers with their first complete set of cipher materials. This is the story of how a junior naval officer, a brilliant cryptographer, and a desperate gamble came together in one of the war's most audacious and consequential special operations. The Unbreakable Code, the story of Enigma and the race to break it. Arthur Scherbius never intended to change the course of world history. Standing in his Berlin workshop in 1918, the electrical engineer simply wanted to protect German business secrets from industrial espionage. His mechanical encryption device, with its brass rotors, intricate wiring, and typewriter-like keyboard, was designed for banks and corporations, not warfare. But as he turned the hand-carved wooden crank of his first prototype, listening to the satisfying click-clack of its gears, he had inadvertently created what would become the most sophisticated encryption device ever built, the Enigma machine. By 1941, over 30,000 Enigma machines formed the backbone of Nazi military communications. Each morning, German operators would consult their codebooks for the day's settings, carefully positioning the machine's rotors and plugging cables into a switchboard that scrambled the electrical signals in ever more complex patterns. With 3 rotors chosen from a set of 5, each with 26 positions, and a plug board allowing for 10 different cable connections, the possible combinations numbered in the millions. Even if Allied cryptographers intercepted a message and knew it said, "Attack at dawn," they would need to try 158 quintillion, 962 quadrillion, 555 trillion, 217 billion, 826 million, 360,000 different combinations to find the right settings. And those settings changed every 24 hours. Hitler's generals were so confident in Enigma's mathematical impossibility that they used it to transmit their most sensitive strategic plans. The Germans even bragged about it, with Admiral Karl Dönitz declaring, "The enemy will never break our signals." U-boat commanders received detailed coordinates and battle plans through Enigma transmissions, coordinating their deadly Wolfpack attacks on Allied convoys with unprecedented precision. The death toll in the Atlantic mounted as Britain's vital supply lines were strangled by submarines guided by encrypted messages that seemed impossible to understand. But mathematics had a fatal flaw: human beings. Every morning, sleepy radio operators made small mistakes in their routines. Every night, weather reports encrypted with Enigma contained predictable phrases about wind speeds and cloud cover. And in stations across occupied Europe, overworked clerks took shortcuts, repeated messages, or failed to change settings as frequently as ordered. These tiny cracks in the unbreakable code would soon be exploited by an unlikely alliance of British naval officers, Polish mathematicians, and eccentric geniuses who saw patterns where others saw only chaos. The race to break Enigma had begun years earlier in a forest outside Warsaw, where Polish cryptographers had made the first breakthrough. But by 1941, the Germans had added complexity to the machine that rendered previous code-breaking methods useless. The only way to break the new Enigma was to capture one, along with its codebooks, key lists, and daily settings. It would require an operation so audacious that even its planners thought it might be impossible. And it would fall to a young officer named David Balme to make it happen. The Hunters, a daring mission to capture a U-boat. Captain Joe Baker Creswell had made a career of being underestimated. At 41, he was considered too young to command a destroyer flotilla, too unconventional in his tactics, and too friendly with his crew. Yet as he paced the bridge of HMS Broadway in the spring of 1941, his unorthodox approach to hunting U-boats had already made him one of the most successful sub-hunters in the Royal Navy. While other captains followed standard doctrine, methodical grid searches, and textbook depth charge patterns, Baker Creswell studied wolf-pack psychology, plotting German commanders' habits like a big game hunter tracking clever prey. His most controversial innovation was the creep and leap, keeping his destroyers dead silent for hours, drifting on minimal power, then suddenly surging to full speed when sonar picked up the faintest echo. Traditional naval officers sneered at such ungentlemanly tactics, but Baker Creswell's kill count spoke for itself. Now he had been handpicked for a mission so classified that even he didn't know its full scope. All he knew was that naval intelligence wanted a U-boat captured intact, something considered virtually impossible. The team assembled for this seemingly suicidal task defied every naval convention. Lieutenant Patrick Willis, his sonar officer, was a former jazz pianist who could identify individual U-boats by the unique sound of their propellers, like a musician recognizing different instruments in an orchestra. Chief Petty Officer Edward Barlow, the depth charge expert, had been a demolitions engineer in civilian life and understood explosives with an artist's intuition. And then there was Sub-Lieutenant David Balme, barely out of training, who possessed the rare combination of physical courage and methodical patience that would be required for the most dangerous part of the mission. But the most unusual member of Baker Creswell's team never set foot on HMS Broadway. Hidden away in a basement office at Bletchley Park, Joan Clark, one of the few female cryptanalysts allowed to work on Naval Enigma, had discovered a pattern in U-boat radio transmissions that suggested a regular patrol route through what the Germans considered a safe sector. If her analysis was correct, and if Baker Creswell's hunters could strike at precisely the right moment, they might achieve what the Admiralty considered impossible: forcing a U-boat to surface without destroying its precious cargo of code machines and documents. As April turned to May, Baker Creswell's flotilla began haunting the predicted patrol route, playing an elaborate game of hide-and-seek in the storm-tossed Atlantic. The hunters had become the hunted, but with a twist that would have profound implications for the entire war. They weren't just stalking a submarine, they were stalking history itself. And when the moment came, they would have just minutes to seize it. Planning Operation Primrose, a daring naval intelligence mission. Admiral John Godfrey's office at Naval Intelligence buzzed with barely contained tension as he unrolled a massive Atlantic chart across his mahogany desk. "Gentlemen," he said to the small group gathered around him, "what I'm about to share must not leave this room." His finger traced a zigzag pattern through the cold waters south of Iceland, a route that would become the hunting ground for the most ambitious naval intelligence operation of the war. The plan that emerged over the next 3 weeks defied conventional naval warfare. Instead of trying to sink U-boats, a specially selected group of destroyers would attempt to disable one without destroying it. The depth charges would be deliberately set too shallow, designed to force a submarine to surface rather than crush its hull. It was like trying to catch a tiger with a net made of silk. One miscalculation would result in either the sub's escape or its complete destruction. Training for Operation Primrose took place in absolute secrecy off the Scottish coast. The boarding parties practiced their drills in the hulk of a captured Italian submarine, timing themselves as they searched for documents and equipment. Every man memorized detailed diagrams of the Enigma machine and its components, though they weren't told why these particular pieces of equipment were so crucial. The boarding teams learned to pick German locks, navigate flooded compartments, and distinguish important documents from routine paperwork, all while working against the clock in complete darkness. But the most critical element of the plan relied on deception. The German U-boat command had to believe that any capture was pure chance, not a carefully orchestrated trap. Every radio transmission between the hunting group ships was crafted to sound routine. False reports were deliberately leaked, suggesting that British anti-submarine efforts were focused hundreds of miles away. Even the depth charge patterns were designed to mimic standard attacks, hiding their true purpose beneath a veneer of typical naval combat. The operations planners grappled with harrowing ethical questions. The best chance of capturing an Enigma would come from attacking a damaged U-boat, one already struggling with mechanical problems or low on supplies. This meant potentially passing up opportunities to sink healthy submarines, allowing them to escape and sink more Allied ships, while waiting for the perfect target. It was a devil's bargain that would haunt the operation's architects for years to come. As May 1941 approached, weather reports from the North Atlantic grew increasingly ominous. Storms were gathering that would make the already dangerous mission nearly impossible. But in the Byzantine calculations of naval intelligence, bad weather offered one crucial advantage. German U-boats would be forced to surface more frequently to charge their batteries, making them vulnerable. The hunters would have to venture into these same treacherous conditions, fighting not only the enemy, but the very forces of nature. The final briefing took place on a rain-lashed evening aboard HMS Broadway. Captain Baker Cresswell gathered his key officers in the wardroom, where they pored over the latest intelligence reports. None of them knew they were about to participate in one of the most important naval operations of the war. None of them could have guessed that their actions would help break the unbreakable code. They knew only that they were hunting something precious, something worth risking everything to capture. The perfect storm, the capture of U-110 and its Enigma machine. May 9, 1941 dawned black as midnight in the North Atlantic. Waves the size of houses crashed over HMS Broadway's bow as Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp peered through U-110's periscope, completely unaware he was being hunted. Lemp was one of Germany's most experienced U-boat commanders, with 16 merchant ships and 1 destroyer to his credit. But his greatest claim to fame, or infamy, was a mistake that had nearly triggered America's entry into the war: his torpedoing of the neutral passenger ship SS Athenia in 1939. The storm had forced U-110 to surface repeatedly over the past 2 days, its batteries desperately needing recharge. Each time, Lemp had to choose between 2 deadly risks: running on the surface where Allied aircraft and ships could spot him, or staying submerged until his batteries died completely. But this morning, he thought the weather was his ally. No sane captain would attempt attack operations in such conditions. At 10:24 a.m., a faint hydrophone contact caught Lieutenant Willis's attention on HMS Broadway. In the cacophony of wind and waves, he detected an almost musical note, the distinctive sound of U-110's propellers, which he'd learned to recognize during those long training sessions. He didn't signal his discovery immediately. Following Baker Creswell's doctrine, the entire hunting group maintained radio silence, communicating through flag signals barely visible in the storm. The trap closed with precision born of endless practice. HMS Obretia dropped the first pattern of shallow-set depth charges, deliberately placed to drive the U-boat toward HMS Broadway's waiting sonar. U-110 dove deep, but with partially charged batteries, Lemp couldn't maintain depth. The sub began a deadly dance, diving, surfacing, diving again, as more depth charges exploded around her. At 11:15 a.m., a series of explosions rocked U-110's hull. Lemp had survived dozens of depth charge attacks, but these were different. The blasts weren't trying to crush his boat, they were hurting it, forcing it up toward the surface. In the chaos of alarms and shouted orders, he made a fatal error. Instead of scuttling his vessel, he ordered an emergency surface to save his crew. U-110 broke the surface like a wounded whale, water cascading from its conning tower. Lemp realized his mistake instantly. Through the driving rain, he could make out not one but 3 British destroyers, their guns already trained on his helpless vessel. In that moment, he remembered his final standing order: protect the Enigma at all costs. But it was too late. His crew was already abandoning ship, and in the confusion, no one had destroyed the code room's precious contents. As his men leaped into the freezing Atlantic, Lemp remained aboard, presumably to scuttle the submarine. He was never seen again. Some say he went down with his boat, trying to destroy its secrets. Others believe he was lost in the heaving seas. But in those crucial minutes of chaos, he left behind the prize that Allied intelligence had sought for years. And now, through the towering waves, a small boarding party was making its way toward the stricken U-boat, about to make history. 7 minutes that changed history. "Boarding party away!" The command cut through the howling wind as David Balme and his 4 volunteers clambered down HMS Broadway's heaving side. Their small wooden whaler pitched violently in waves that threatened to dash them against either the destroyer's hull or the surfaced U-boat. Each man knew they might be rowing into a trap. Submarines were often rigged with explosive charges to prevent capture, and this one could slip beneath the waves at any moment, dragging them down with it. Time crystallized into a series of razor-sharp moments. The strain of the oars against the waves. The taste of salt spray. The dark mass of U-110 growing larger as they approached. Balme led the way up the submarine's outer hull, his feet searching for purchase on the slick metal. The conning tower hatch gaped open like a wound. He paused at the top, heart pounding. No one had ever captured a fully equipped U-boat before. There was no protocol, no manual for what he was about to do. Inside the U-boat, chaos reigned frozen in time. Half-eaten meals lay abandoned on mess tables. Charts remained pinned to walls. Coffee cups still steamed. But it was in the control room that Balme discovered something that made his breath catch. an Enigma machine, intact and complete. Yet he didn't know its significance. To him, it was simply item number 1 on his checklist of classified materials to retrieve. His orders were explicit: grab everything that looked important, especially anything with rotors or dials. The 7-minute time limit enforced brutal choices. Balme's team worked with desperate efficiency, yanking codebooks from drawers, stuffing papers into waterproof bags, unbolting equipment from walls. Every second brought the risk of scuttling charges detonating, or the submarine beginning its final dive. In the radio room, they found the motherlode current cipher settings, key lists, and the Holy Grail. The entire month's worth of Enigma codes, still valid for 3 more weeks. As the last minute ticked down, Petty Officer Bridger emerged from the captain's cabin with a leather case containing personal papers, letters, photographs, and a diary. These human artifacts would later prove invaluable, providing insights into U-boat operations that even the Enigma couldn't reveal. But there was no time to consider their significance. The order to evacuate came as U-110 began listing sharply to port. They barely made it. As their whaler pulled away, the submarine's bow began to sink. But unlike other U-boat captures, this one had been accomplished without the Germans realizing what had been taken. The crew, already rescued by other ships, believed they had followed protocol and destroyed everything of value. In fact, they radioed Berlin reporting all secret materials lost, a message that was itself decoded at Bletchley Park weeks later, confirming the perfect success of the deception. Back on HMS Broadway's deck, Balme and his team stood dripping and shivering, watching U-110 finally slip beneath the waves. None of them knew they had just coordinated one of the greatest intelligence coups in naval history. The real mission, keeping the capture secret, was just beginning. Within hours, the Enigma machine and its accompanying documents were on their way to Bletchley Park, wrapped in oilskins and guarded by armed sailors who had no idea they were protecting the key to ending the war. The secret journey, unveiling the hidden victory of Operation Primrose. The unmarked van that pulled away from HMS Broadway's berth in the dead of night carried more than just waterlogged German equipment. It carried the future of the war itself. But first, the precious cargo had to navigate a gauntlet of potential security leaks. Every person who caught a glimpse of the operation posed a risk of exposing the secret to German intelligence. The driver had been told he was transporting sensitive meteorological equipment. The guards thought they were protecting captured navigation devices. Even the naval officers who had risked their lives to seize the materials didn't know their true destination. Alan Turing was taking his customary late-night walk around Bletchley Park's lake when the van arrived. He'd been battling insomnia, his mind consumed with the mathematical paradoxes of breaking Enigma. The codebreaker watched from the shadows as white-gloved handlers carefully transferred wooden crates into Hut 8, his peripheral vision catching the distinctive silhouette of Commander Edward Travis, the only other person at Bletchley authorized to know about Operation Primrose's success. The next 48 hours in Hut 8 unfolded like a thriller. As Turing's team unpacked the waterlogged Enigma machine, Joan Clark discovered something extraordinary in the captured documents, a complete set of kisses. These were the ceremonial greetings that U-boat commanders used to begin their messages, formal phrases that could be compared against encrypted text to find patterns. Combined with the current key settings, they provided the crucial breakthrough that had eluded the codebreakers for months. But maintaining the secret required an elaborate dance of deception. When Bletchley Park began producing astonishingly accurate intelligence about U-boat movements, cover stories had to be created. Fake reconnaissance flights were logged. False radio intercepts were manufactured. A network of imaginary spies in Norwegian ports was invented to explain how Britain was locating German submarines with such precision. The deception went so deep that even King George VI was given a carefully edited version of events during his visit to the code-breaking center. The captured Enigma revealed more than just military intelligence. It exposed the human side of the U-boat war. Among the waterlogged papers were letters from sailors' families, propaganda newsletters, and personal diaries that painted a picture of declining morale in the German submarine fleet. This psychological intelligence proved almost as valuable as the technical details, helping Allied commanders understand the breaking points in Hitler's underwater warfare strategy. As spring turned to summer, the intelligence flowing from Operation Primrose's captured materials began reshaping the Battle of the Atlantic. But in a war where knowledge itself was a weapon, the greatest victory was keeping that success hidden. Every decoded message, every intercepted order, every U-boat found and sunk had to appear to be the result of conventional naval warfare. It would be 30 years before the true story could be told, and by then, many of the operation's heroes had taken their secrets to the grave. The Hidden Victory: Breaking Enigma and its Lasting Legacy. The true impact of Operation Primrose emerged in the statistical silence of ships that didn't sink. Throughout the summer of 1941, U-boat commanders radioed increasingly frustrated messages to Berlin, reporting convoy after convoy that seemed to vanish into thin air. Massive merchant fleets would appear on German radar, then inexplicably disappear when U-boats arrived at their predicted locations. The Nazi high command blamed everything from faulty intelligence to Allied radar advances, never suspecting their unbreakable code had been compromised. Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, sensed something was wrong. His carefully orchestrated wolfpack tactics, which had been decimating Allied shipping, suddenly seemed to strike at empty ocean. In a single month, successful attacks dropped by 60%. He ordered an investigation into potential security leaks, but it focused on the wrong targets, searching for spies in French ports while the real breach lay in the Enigma system itself. His final report to Hitler concluded that the Allies had simply grown lucky in their anti-submarine tactics. In the shadowy world of wartime intelligence, success was measured in silence. Every time the Allies used Enigma intelligence, they had to fabricate a plausible alternative explanation. Resistance fighters would be credited with information that came from decoded messages. Random patrol aircraft would accidentally spot U-boats whose positions were known from intercepted orders. The deception became so elaborate that entire fake reconnaissance squadrons existed on paper, complete with fictional pilot logs and maintenance records. The secret nearly broke in December 1941 when a German spy in Liverpool overheard dockworkers discussing a captured U-boat. Within hours, Nazi intelligence launched a massive investigation. The British response was masterful. They staged an elaborate ruse suggesting the workers had confused a captured Italian submarine for a U-boat. To support the deception, they even arranged for photographs of the Italian sub to be accidentally leaked to neutral newspapers, complete with doctored dates matching the timeline of U-110's sinking. By war's end, Operation Primrose's captured Enigma materials had contributed to the sinking of over 700 U-boats, saved thousands of merchant ships, and prevented countless Allied casualties. But the toll of secrecy was heavy. The men who captured U-110 watched their remarkable achievement fade into obscurity. David Balme attended dozens of victory celebrations where he couldn't mention his most significant contribution to the war. Captain Baker Creswell took the details of the operation to his grave in 1966, never knowing the full scope of what his men had accomplished. Recognition finally came in the 1970s, when the British government began declassifying Operation Primrose files. The surviving participants discovered that their minor naval skirmish had helped crack one of history's greatest mysteries. But perhaps the operation's most lasting impact wasn't military, it was scientific. The lessons learned from breaking Enigma laid the groundwork for modern computer science and cryptography. The captured machine from U-110 had not only helped win a war, it had launched a technological revolution that would reshape the world. The legacy of Operation Primrose: courage, code-breaking, and modern encryption. On a cold morning in 2019, a small group gathered at Britain's National Museum of Computing to witness something extraordinary. On a polished wooden table sat an original Enigma machine, not just any Enigma, but one that had survived decades of secrecy, carefully preserved since its capture in Operation Primrose. As museum curator David Spencer carefully turned the brass rotors, the sharp clicking sound echoed through the room like a ghost from the past. Among the observers was Emily Balme, granddaughter of Sub-Lieutenant David Balme, seeing for the first time the machine her grandfather had risked his life to capture. The ripples from Operation Primrose continue to spread through modern technology like invisible waves. When Apple engineers designed their first iPhone encryption protocols, they studied the mathematical principles discovered by Bletchley Park's codebreakers. The quantum encryption protecting today's most sensitive communications traces its intellectual lineage to the cryptographic battles of World War II. In Silicon Valley boardrooms and Pentagon war rooms, the lessons of Enigma still shape how we think about information security and the eternal contest between codemakers and codebreakers. But perhaps the operation's most profound legacy lies not in technology, but in human nature. The story of U-110 demonstrates how victory often hinges not on grand strategies, but on brief moments of individual courage. A young officer descending into a potentially booby-trapped submarine, a jazz musician turned sonar operator, hearing patterns in chaos, a captain willing to try unconventional tactics. It reminds us that in the fog of war, the most important battles are often the ones history doesn't see for decades. The final twist in the Operation Primrose saga came in 2013, when deep-sea explorers located U-110's wreck. Remote cameras revealed the submarine sitting upright on the Atlantic floor, still bearing the scars of depth charges and the hurried evacuation. Inside the deteriorating hull, they found something unexpected: a hidden compartment behind the control room, sealed for over 70 years. When opened, it contained a waterlogged notebook with a message from Captain Lemp, written in his final moments. "For those who find this, you have won not just a battle, but a war of minds. The future belongs to those who control not bullets, but information." Today, as cyber warfare replaces submarine warfare and quantum computers threaten to make current encryption obsolete, Operation Primrose offers a timeless lesson. In the realm of intelligence and counterintelligence, the greatest victories are the ones that remain hidden, and the most powerful weapons are often the ones the enemy doesn't know you possess. The legacy of those 7 minutes aboard U-110 lives on in every encrypted message, every cybersecurity protocol, and every codebreaker who dares to believe that no system is truly unbreakable.